Welcome to Termann Feichin, a scenic village on the coast of County Louth, Ireland. Home to a rich history, a beautiful sandy beach, a links golf course, 2 churches and the Irish Country Women's Association, Termann Feichin has long been a place that people have come to visit. Well, Termann Feichin, a local community group, wanted to take a deeper look at who we are and what it's like to live in our village, where the population has tripled since the Celtic Tiger. In this film, you'll hear from people who've lived here for generations and others who've chosen to make the village their home. We'll be reminiscing, talking history, politics, music, and we'll consider whether hit comedy Father Ted might ever have happened had 2 Termann Feichin teenagers not hit it off over 1970s punk. So sit back, immerse yourself in village life, and hear from the heart of Termann Feichin. Now, Termann Feichin is a truly historical place, and we have evidence of people settling here from at least the Bronze Age. St Feichin's Monastery, where the village gets its name, was founded in the 7th century, and I spoke to Deirdre Murphy, an archaeologist who grew up right in the centre of Termann Feichin, about the village's long and proud ecclesiastical history.
The monastery of St Feichin, the name of Termann Feichin, Termann Feichin, refers to the sanctuary of St Feichin, so he gives his name to the monastery. He died in 664 AD on the 14th of February from the Yellow Plague. So whether he was here or not, we're not too sure. There's an early Christian slab inside the Church of Ireland, and it refers to Ultan and Dovhuk, who it's in Irish and it translates as a prayer for Ultan and Dovhuk, who made this stone fort. So that more or less refers to the enclosure around the monastery. Now, Ultan may have been an abbot of the monastery. He is recorded in the annals as an abbot, but there was also an Ultan who was a very good friend, personal friend of St Feichin's. The high cross that is there it's a 10th century transitional high cross. It's located inside the gate, but that's actually not its original location. It would have been located to the south of the existing church. The base isn't the original base either. The cross it depicts the crucifixion of Christ on the east face, and on the west face it's Christ in glory. What's unusual about the crucifixion scene is that Christ isn't nailed to the cross, he's actually tied to the cross. This cross is earlier in the sequence than the likes of the cross of scriptures in Clonmacnoise or the cross of Murdoch in Monaster Boyce. They're scriptural crosses, and there's scenes from scripture depicted all across them. In Termann Feichin, the shaft of the cross, it's ornate. There's trumpets and trefoil and different designs on it, but there aren't any scriptural scenes on it.
And what about the Viking raid that happened here? Do we know much about it, and what happened to the monastery during those times?
Well, obviously the monastery was fairly affluent. The fact that the Vikings came at all, they came in 1013, raided the monastery. It's recorded in the annals of the Four Masters. But there were other people around as well, other tribes who raided the monastery. We have the Ucrahan came in 1025, and then in 1146 you had the men from Bergia. And that last raid actually was quite devastating for the monastery. And you have the king of Oriel, Donnacha O'Carroll. He's recorded in 1164 as actually repairing the church, and he put canons, regulars into it at the time. So the monastery would have suffered quite a devastating fate. Now, during the attacks, there was a souterrain found there. We discovered it in the mid-80s. There was a burial, an actual funeral was due to take place the next day, and when they were excavating the grave diggers, in the corner of the grave, they found a stone in the base, and when they lifted it up, they came upon a beehive chamber. Now, my brother was studying archaeology at the time, and a local man from Banktown, Frank Carroll, the two of them went down into the souterrain and recorded it. You had 2 beehive chambers and passages within the structure. The beehive chambers were where the monks probably would have congregated and stayed there while the attacks were taking place. Now, there were air vents as well, because obviously they could be down there for any amount of time and they would have suffocated. And the air vents would have extended throughout the monastery, not necessarily visible to any attacker. They would have had food down there. There's no evidence of a round tower in Termann Feichin, so these souterrains were used for the defensive purposes instead.
So when people are in their graveyard, that's what's under their feet?
Yes, because the souterrain is actually on the south side of the church, and it's below the level of the existing graves that are there.
Deirdre, we're standing outside the old schoolhouse, and we know that this area is called the Boyne and that the Bishop's Palace was here. Can you tell us about that and how it operated in the Middle Ages?
Yes, so this area here is the Yellow Gap, and from here back to the river, so we're looking at the south side of the river, was the site of the Archbishop's Palace. The name, obviously, the place name, the Boyne, which is still used today, the Boyne refers to the enclosed area around the castle. So the Archbishop's Palace, basically the Anglo-Normans invaded Ireland at the end of the 12th century, and they, at the time, Edward I decreed that when the archbishops, they took over the Archdiocese of Armagh, and Edward I decreed that no Irishman could fill the See of Armagh. So therefore we had the Pale, and therefore the archbishops were all Englishmen, and it wouldn't have been safe for them to go outside the Pale. Therefore they had to look for a residence inside the Pale. So we have a residence here at Termann Feichin, and there was one at Dromiskin. The one here in Termann Feichin was probably here from about 1200, and it was occupied right up until the 17th century. The last primate here, I think, was around 1613, and he was primate Hampton, and he built a residence in Drogheda. But all through that Middle Ages, Ireland was the centre of ecclesiastical courts. The St Feichin's, getting back to that now functioned as a pro-cathedral. It was refurbed, and it was known as the Great Church of Feichin. So that would have been another reason why the archbishops decided to settle here. Also, we're on the coast, so we've close proximity to the Irish Sea, and they used to go over, the archbishops used to go over and back to England from Queensborough. And at Queensborough, on the second edition, on the 25-inch OS map, there's a pier marked Bishop's Pier, and that's most likely the spot where they embarked to go to the UK. Also, just to note, Queensborough, more than likely, the name comes from one of the primates here. Queensborough was one of the primates who was here in 1477. So he probably gave his name to that hamlet.
They're so interesting. Thanks so much. So I'm delighted to be joined by Paud Leech, who is a farmer from Beltitchburne. Paud, your farm was handed down to you from your father, and he inherited from his father. So you know this land very, very well.
Yes, my great-grandfather was actually raised there. Now, there was a funny thing, while I got married early in life, there was only one descendant in each family down the years, which meant I have very little or no cousins or relations in the locality. My father increased that. I had two sisters, and I had two boys and two girls, and some of them living locally, and the youngest one is living down in Knockbridge.
And you're a dairy farmer?
Well, a dairy farmer now, but back in old God's time, you could say, we did a bit of everything. We grew potatoes, we grew corn, we kept a few pigs. Mother kept hens and turkeys, and that was nearly every farm. In the locality, everybody had a bit of everything.
So kind of self-sufficient, I think.
Self-sufficient, with a bit to sell, with buying money.
So back in the day, around harvest time, would people help when you were young? Because that's all gone kind of now. Do you remember that?
It used to take probably 15, 16 people at thrashing. And needless to say, there'd be one or two from every farm, around 4 or 5 different farms, or maybe 4. There might be 1 or 2 lads would go around with the mill that toss the sheep up on the mill for loosening and that sort of thing. But it was generally a kind of a festival that everybody helped in. They came to us and we'd go to them, and you'd be out maybe for a fortnight or 3 weeks.
Yeah, and I think people got to appreciate when you're involved in something, you see the work that goes into it, whereas I think it's very different now. And Macra and Feirme was very important and is important in your life. Can you tell me a bit about your involvement in
Macra was probably one of the biggest things in my life. My father would have been one of the people who started, along with 10 or 11 others, which I'm not going to name at the moment because there's a bit of controversy over who was in first and who wasn't. But no, there was 10 or 12 of them in it. And I joined when I was 14. See, that time, one of the things out in the country was when you got to 14, you could jack up
adult,
school
really,
and say adios. So, but I went to it, and so there was only that time the competitions in Macra we used to be only 25 back to 14, and of course I've been 14, and most of the farmers that time were over 25, so you were pushed into teams and all the rest of it, and I got to like the competition end of it. So down the years that we were competing, we'd be coming second here and second there, and the team ahead of us would be thanking various...
And what sort of competitions, Paud, was it? What were the competitions?
Speaking, debating, there was cattle judging, poultry judging, then there was farm paths, would be the usual putting up posts and maybe marking out the foundation of a shed. And then when the lassies came in, they came in about the 60s. There was kind of homemaking and artistry in the home and those sort of things to accommodate those, and they'd also be on the public speaking and debating teams.
Yeah.
So, so when I came to 25, I kind of graduated to helping the teams, and that's where I really got the real love of it, because it was great to see people who could I say wasn't very good at speaking, they were all right talking behind their back, but to stand up on their two legs.
Yeah, it's very different.
It was a different story. And we got quite good at it. In fact, up till we won our first All Ireland, we had about 17 runners up in All Ireland of different sorts.
And it was, I mean, when you were debating back then, it's not like you could turn to Google and look up a fact. You had to really study your subject if you're going to be able to speak about it, didn't you?
Oh, it was, and not like now. You can Google up anything and everybody. It's trying to sift through the amount that you get in rather than what you can get. I often remember both myself and different of them maybe spending half a day on the phone trying to get a particular version of whatever
Facts,
it was.
yeah.
We debated everything from religion to
Politics of the day, probably all the big
politics
questions.
to a bit, farming subjects, DU.
But you also met your wife through Macra, so it wasn't just debating. It was, I think Macra was very important for socialising back then.
Granted, sure, people was, how would you say, they were kind of, as far as the bicycle could bring you in back in those early days, so you were limited to your choice. But when Macra started, the one good thing that was in it, there was always 3 or 4 cars, people with clubs, and some of the younger members were, they'd be only teenagers, and so they wouldn't be driving, wouldn't have a car, but enthusiastic. And everybody, it's not like now that you have to have a big space wagon. If you want to bring 5 or 6, there was often 10 crammed into a car going off, and but from here to Cork and Kerry and anywhere you like.
You travelled that far, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, Limerick.
Can you tell me what it was like in the village? Because I know we were talking about the bridge as being like a very central place where people gathered. Can you tell me what that was like when you were younger?
Well, back when I was young, there was really only the football was really all there was. And you had IFA and Macra and you had ICA. But the younger crowd wouldn't have joined up those because they were more or less the older people. But I do remember the local hall, we used to have films for Friday night and Sunday night.
So that was like, were there current movies that would be shown? It was like your own little cinema?
Yeah, black and whites at that time.
Yeah.
And then there just, I think it was later after that, there used to be a hop of a Wednesday. Fintan Stanley was a guy accordionist and he supplied the music most. He had a band at the time and he supplied the music of a Wednesday night.
Is there anything that you think that is still the same in Termann Feichin, that you still feel hasn't changed?
No.
It's all changed.
Sadly.
For you?
Sadly, yeah.
Really?
It's a funny thing. You come down to the village, and rather than what some people would call the blow-ins being strangers, I kind of feel we're the strangers.
Really?
Because, I'll give you an example. There was only 96 on the roll when I was at school, and I often collected the grandchildren from school, and years ago, well, you'd know the locals, Moores and McLews and McWerks from Beltray, and you knew the features. That was so.
Well, I think that's us for today. Thanks very much for speaking to us, and it's lovely to hear your memories, and especially your fond memories of Macra and Feirme. And it's still going strong, isn't it, Macra?
It's still going strong. The one at the base only 3 years ago, and
you were leading them, I think, were you?
I give them a hand at them too, yeah. And I think we're running up in a couple of different competitions.
So you still got...
The competitions evolve over the years. There was live entertainment and there's various things, you know.
Yeah. So you still got it, Paud?
Pardon?
You still got it?
I don't know whether I have. Well, it's the help. I only kind of guide a bit.
Yeah.
That's about the size of it.
No, that's very interesting. Thanks very much for talking to us today.
Not at all. Quite welcome.
Gaeilge was born in northern Italy and came to Ireland to study English just after her leaving cert year. I asked her why she chose Ireland over Scotland and how she came to live in Termonfeckin.
Well, I was finishing off my secondary school journey, let's put it this way. Didn't want to start immediately my university or whatever I was going to be after. And I had studied languages in secondary school as my primary subjects, so I wanted to strengthen my English. The toss was between Scotland and Ireland, and at the end of it, I found a lovely family here in Ireland and I came over to learn the language.
So it was the Celts that were attracting you over?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I suppose, how did you come to Termonfeckin then?
I came to Termonfeckin in 2006. I was looking to buy. I had been in Dublin for 9 years. Did not want to continue to rent. It was kind of the tail end of the Celtic Tiger. Again, prices were absolutely minted in Dublin, and I wanted to buy the best thing that I could. So I drove over to see one of the estates that we were building and kind of fell in love with the place. As I was driving in and I saw the trees, the steeples, I was like, I like this place. And then incidentally, when I walked into the show house, the lady that was showing it was the sister of the lady that I'd worked for all those years ago. So wow. I kind of took it as
that's a big sign.
A sign from above.
Absolutely.
So I was like, yeah, I'm taking it.
That was a crazy connection then.
Crazy connection, yeah.
And so you haven't looked back, you've lived here ever since, and you love it?
Yeah, I've lived here since. I love it. And I think I've grown to love it more and more since, especially in the last few years when I've stopped working in IBM. So once I stopped commuting, I kind of got the opportunity to actually get to really know the village more, to make more connections, because obviously before I was, like many others, leaving the house early, coming back late, and I would have socialized maybe more with people from work, so going again back to Dublin or kind of in the outskirts.
So actually the pandemic gave you an opportunity to learn about the village more than before. That's interesting.
Yeah.
One last question is, I've heard that there is a cookbook on the go, and that are you editing it, or can you tell me about it?
So as part of the Termonfeckin development group, we are trying to put together something to build more things, to build community. And Termonfeckin has become a very, very varied and international community at this point. So we want to collect recipes from the community and put together a little cookbook that will sell to raise funds for something that we haven't decided yet in terms of what exactly it will go to. But the idea is that we'll bring together people from all over the village, and we'll sell it probably either Christmas or over the New Year.
I'll say Flavours of Termonfeckin.
Flavours of Termonfeckin, yeah.
That's your title now. You can take that.
No, we do have a a working title.
Okay.
We are not quite there yet on the final title yet, but the idea is to try and have some fun, involve the kids. We were trying to think about involving some of the residents maybe in Sanil to get some of the older recipes, and then mix it up with everything that everyone else that
It's a
has
brilliant idea. Yeah.
blown in like me can offer.
It's a brilliant idea, and I hope it comes together, because I'd definitely buy it, and I would actually probably cook it as well. So thanks a million for talking to us today, Gaia, and you're so welcome. We're so glad that you found us here in Termann Feichin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Within our community, there's a group of volunteers hard at work. I spoke to Dave Looney of the Termann Feichin Development Board about some of the projects they've undertaken. Dave, can you tell me about the Termann Feichin Development Board and the work that it does in the community?
The Termann Feichin Development Board, which also goes by the name of Well Termann Feichin, is a group of locals from a diverse range of backgrounds with shared and different interests. And our aim really is to promote Termann Feichin as an area and to support and celebrate local businesses, clubs, and also to get involved in certain specific projects that can improve the life and the well-being of the people of Termann Feichin.
Dave, can you tell me about the Facebook page called Well Termann Feichin?
Yes, it's the Termann Feichin Development Board on Facebook. We would go by the name Well Termann Feichin, which kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit easier. But it's a platform for sharing stories, sharing photographs, even little bits of information about the village. And it's a great place to get in touch and kind of keep up to date with local events.
If people want to get in touch or get involved, how can they do that?
They can do it directly through the Facebook page, Well Termann Feichin, or the email address, which is welltermannfeichin@gmail.com.
And are you looking for volunteers to come forward?
We're always looking for volunteers. And of course, from any background or from any interest. Again, it's an open book. If you have something that you think could benefit the community and would like to see if it would be viable, or if there's anybody else who would share the interest, get in touch. Or if you just have a little bit of time to spare to get involved and help out with some of these projects.
Rory Houlihan is the Youth Liaison Officer for Well Termann Feichin and made Irish and EU headlines for speaking out about homophobic bullying.
I was actually selected as a result of work experience as the Taoiseach Takeover winner with UNICEF. So basically that meant that I, on World Children's Day, the 20th of November, had the opportunity, the amazing opportunity to speak to An Taoiseach Micheál Martin about an issue that concerned me. And as a gay teen who has experienced homophobia, I decided to speak about societal issues in relation to members of the LGBTQ+ community.
And how was his reaction when you spoke to him about that? Because I think you had a really good conversation.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was we ended up talking for 45 minutes. It was lovely, and it was just great. He spoke so eloquently and he was so interested and really invested in what I had to say. I really honed in on the RSC program, the Relationships and Sexuality Education program, which, funny enough, does not really cater for different sexual orientations. I suppose that it really only looks at definitions and not so much situations like asking someone properly and politely how to ask their how to know what their pronouns are, or how to come out, how to speak to someone if you know they are struggling or you think they are struggling with their sexuality. And I spoke about how it could be taught through the school, and this, in a way, it wouldn't eliminate homophobia, because you can't eliminate homophobia no matter how much we want to or how much you want to get rid of any discrimination in general. But I feel that if you taught it more through the schools, there would be more of an acceptance. And on Taoiseach, Micheál Martin even added in that potentially the form tutors who are teaching wellbeing, or SPHE, could bring in their area of expertise. For example, a history teacher could talk about the history of the LGBT community, or a music teacher could talk about different songs with hidden meanings behind them, or all about coming out.
So you were giving practical ways of helping to, you say you can't eliminate, but helping to reduce the homophobia that you experienced. I think that's really important, that it's not just, you were saying about definitions, that it's just language, but actually living day to day and being able to suggest things that can help. I think it's really important, and I think it's so interesting to hear that you had his ear for so long and obviously made a difference. And it did make a difference, we know that, because what did he go on to do then after your conversation?
So in June 2021, this year, he actually, without my knowledge, he actually, to my surprise, he went to the EU summit, which was in relation to striking down the anti-LGBT Hungarian law. And he actually referenced my story, my name and my story, to the 27 EU leaders.
It's unreal.
Which is, I still can't get over that.
Yeah.
It's mad.
So that's the difference speaking out can make, isn't it?
Yeah, and it really shows that if you use your voice, it is so powerful, especially if you are a child. And I know, like, I'm 16, going on 17, most people wouldn't consider me to be a child, but under the eyes of the law, I am a child, and with UNICEF, I'm a child. Internationally, I am recognised as a child. So I think it's very nice to know that us young people have such value added to our voices.
What's Termann Feichin like as a young person to grow up in now? Because we've spoken to some guests who are much older now, and they're looking back fondly on their youth. As a young person today, how do you feel about it? Do you think you're lucky to live here? Is there anything you'd like to change?
I think it's a very nice village. I think it's lovely that it's quiet at times, very quiet. It is developing, which is nice, but I feel that the local people have their voices heard, which is very important. So we always are tuned in as to what's really happening. Developers aren't just coming in and building high-rise flats. We have our lovely village that has always been there, and the pride and spirit of the village remains the same as it was 50 years ago. I really think it is a lovely village, and it's great the way it's located to the biggest town in Ireland and only an hour from the capital, Dublin, which is absolutely amazing. I myself would actually get the train quite a bit, so it's very handy, and with the enhanced bus service now being 10 times a day instead of 4 times a day, it's very handy. It's great
don't
for connecting.
sell it too much, we want to keep it to ourselves. Thanks a million for speaking to us today, and wish you the very best luck in the future.
Perfect, thank you very much.
I'm joined by two well-known writers who spent much of their youth growing up in Termann Feichin. Tony Clayton-Lee is an arts and cultural journalist who's worked for the Irish Times, the Irish Independent, and has edited Cara magazine. Arthur Matthews is the screenwriter behind Father Ted, The Toast of London, Black Books, and just this year he released a book on Dominic Cummings. I spoke to them about all of this and how Termann Feichin influenced their writing. How does it feel to be back in Termann Feichin?
It's great. I mean, my brother still lives here, so I am here maybe twice a month, depending. We might sometimes meet closer to where I live. But generally, it's always good to be back. My mother is buried in the graveyard, so I pay a visit there. And yeah, I mean, Termann Feichin had a very, I suppose, profound effect on what I'm doing now. So it's always good to visit and revisit and maybe just see how it's changed and also maybe how it's kind of stayed the same. I know that's difficult in a kind of rural setting, particularly as the decades go by. But I still see a sense in Termann Feichin of the way it used to be when I arrived in the mid-70s.
And is that did you meet Arthur then?
Well, yeah, I did. I mean, if I may, there's actually a good story about how Arthur and I actually did meet. I would have... Because I don't remember. You don't remember? Yeah, I'm not sure I told you that, but this is absolutely the way it happened. One day I was hitching. I had 3 albums under my arms. They were Marquee Moon by Television. It was the debut album from The Clash, and the debut album from the Sex Pistols, which even now still has a fairly kind of rude title.
What were you doing with them under your arm, hitching in to draw it?
Because we would kind of, meet up with friends and we'd go to their houses and just play the records, basically. Anyway, so this car stopped. I was hitching in. I was hitching in from underneath the tree.
Where people
those
still
big
hitch
trees
from?
at the church.
That was the hitching. That was where everyone used to hitch.
That was the hitching
from.
post, yeah. And anyways, this car stopped. And I got in and I sat down, put the seatbelt on, put the albums on my lap, and it was this, who at that point she seemed a very elderly woman to me. She's probably only in her late 40s, early 50s maybe. So we were chatting along, and I'd only been in the village kind of a few weeks, and it transpired that she knew my mum, because my mum had been there from 75. She was in the gardening club. And listened to the radio and just chit-chat, real small talk. And then she said 2 words, which kind of came out of the blue because it wasn't a topic of conversation. And those 2 words were Sex Pistols. So I was staring ahead, just looking at the road, going, okay. And I said nothing because I was a bit taken aback. And then she said, without any prompting from me, anarchy in the UK. So at that point I thought, okay, something is up, something isn't amiss, but something is interesting here. And I said, how do you know the name of the band and one of their songs? And she said, my 2 kids, that's all they ever listened to. Sex Pistols, Buzzcocks, Ramones. And I'm going, in my head going, wow, I really have to kind of meet these people. And then I said, that's amazing because I'm really into that music too. Would it be possible to, whenever, if ever they're around, would it be possible just to say hello to them? That was it.
So that was obviously
your mum and his sister Ria, yeah,
twin sister,
his mother, Joan Matthews. So then when she dropped me off, she said, "Look, I'll give your mum a shout, and we can arrange for you kids to kind of,
So that was it.
up."
So it was a love of music then that.
Yeah, initially, yeah. I mean, I had never met Arthur before. I had never met his sister Ria before. I'd never met their small group of friends before, who also came from the village. Peter Murphy from Sandpit, Andrew Taw from the main road. Peter's also had a girlfriend, Gillian Kirkpatrick, who was a close relative of the Duffs, who lived beside the Matthews. So it was a very tight-knit group, and very, very quickly we just clicked, I think it's fair to say. We had certainly the instant cultural references of punk rock.
How did your family come to Termann Feichin, Arthur? Because you weren't born here.
No, my father was a farmer in County Meath, and he was quite old and I was quite young with my sister. So we sold the farm. We moved to Rush for a year, and then, because I think he always played golf in Baltray, I think he wanted to be beside the golf course. So we moved in 1968, and then he'd retired. So he used to go to lots of race meetings and play golf all the time.
And how did you find growing up in Termonfeckin? What's your memories of it?
Well, I remember going to school a lot and walking home from school and walking up Thunder Hill over the field. But then I went to boarding school, so I wasn't here all the time anyway. But it was what was great and still is great is the beach and being beside the sea. That's always good. So yeah, being beside the sea I thought was really good.
So did you both work in hot press together, or did you?
Well, Tony, I kind of knew a few people in hot press, but Tony really, there was a job came in hot press as I was working in the graphics, laying it out, and Tony mentioned my name to Niall Stokes, who was the editor. So I did an interview. I remember they asked me, "Have you ever worked very hard? You know what it's like really to work very hard?" And I said no.
In the interview?
No, I'd never worked hard at anything. But they gave me the job anyway.
Yeah. They must have seen something. So you actually were in the graphics, so not the writing, but the laying it out.
Yeah, well,
and
it's funny how hot press started for me. And again, it really boils down to the fact of knowing Arthur and Ria, is that Ria went to UCD. She knew when she was getting the bus from Drogheda to Dublin, a guy from Dundalk who also studied at UCD was a guy called Declan Lynch, who is now a highly established columnist in the Sunday Independent. And back then, this would have been 78, 79-ish.
Yeah.
Declan was writing for hot press. I was not writing anywhere, but Declan, whom I would have, still bump into now and again, but I would have known him much better back then, he said, if you're interested in writing, just do a couple of gig reviews and send them in. So at that point, Drogheda had quite a kind of healthy kind of music scene. Bands were visiting, they were playing the likes of Joey Mars. And
I remember we went to see like Stiff Little Fingers in Drogheda.
Saw Stiff Little Fingers in the Jam.
Yeah.
So on Declan's suggestion, I wrote one review of a band that I saw in Joey Mars.
Have you ever written much before that?
Nothing.
Really?
Nothing,
Wow.
no. So I sent it in, didn't get published, so I was highly disappointed. But then I bumped into Declan a while after, and he said, "Did you send something in?" I said, "Yeah, I did. I sent in a review and nothing happened." And he said, "Oh, let me have a chat with someone." So then, after another week or two, he said, "No, they saw it. They really liked it. There was no room for it." He said, "So I would do another one."
What was the review? Who was it
It
of?
was a band called Crisis.
Oh, I remember Crisis. We used to go and see them.
Yeah, they were
great fun.
Yeah,
They're
they
from
were
the
really,
north.
really good.
I think they're from the north.
So the next review I wrote was published, and it literally did not stop from there.
And who was that?
I think. I think it actually. I can't remember the name of the band, but the lead singer was Johnny Logan's brother.
Yeah, because Johnny's from Drogheda as well, isn't he? Johnny
yeah,
Logan.
I think so. So from then it just never stopped. So, really, very importantly, if I hadn't moved to Termann Feichin, if I hadn't met Arthur and Ria, if Ria hadn't known Declan Lynch, if Declan Lynch hadn't written for Hot Press, I don't know.
You might be back in the Navy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And if I hadn't got into hot press, I wouldn't have met Graham Lennon.
That's true. And in fact, how Niall asked me about you was that at around the time, this would have been more 83, 84.
I went to the hot press in 85.
Right. Well, then you may remember that I edited for a brief period of time, a magazine called Almost News.
I certainly do. I still have some at home.
And I have the copies too. And, we all pitched in a kind of some money.
I laid it out.
You laid out the design.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember, now that you've triggered the memory, is that I brought in a couple of copies to Niall Stokes. And I said, "Look, do you want to give that a plug? Just take a photograph of it and just say, Hot Press contributor Tony Clayton Lee is now editing a Drogheda-based magazine." And he looked through it and he said, "Who's the designer?" And I said, "A mate of mine called Arthur Matthews." And he went, "Oh." So
that was it.
Yeah.
So how then, Arthur, did you go from, say, graphic or design into writing yourself?
I'd done a kind of, Viz magazine, kind of comic. A friend of mine and me did one kind of something like that. So that was kind of writing humorous pieces, and then I did some in hot press and kind of cartoon strips. So, but mostly I was just a graphic designer laying the thing out. But then Graham Linehan joined. He was a hotshot young writer. So he went off to London to write for a music magazine, and he said to me, I was doing some kind of comedy sketches, and there was a band called the Joshua Trio, which was a loose U2 tribute band, kind of. And so I was doing that, and Graham, doing sketches with Graham, and then Graham said, do you want to come to London for a bit, and we'd write sketch comedy and send them into radio programmes or TV.
Was that quite
programmes.
risky at the time, considering it was the 80s?
Well, it was a bit later. It was 91, and I just thought I'd go for a few months and come back and see what happens. But we used to send them into stuff, and we sent them into Smith and Jones, Mel Smith, Griffiths Jones, so they liked them. And then we just ended up going to meetings with them, and it was just weird because I've just seen them on television a few years before, and then they were in their office chatting away with them. And again, it was just one thing led to another.
And I have to ask, because I always wonder, considering the Termonfeckin connection, I mean, the characters through the series are so Irish in so many ways, and the different personalities. Is there any Termonfeckin influences? Is there people from the community in there in some way?
Well, there's a kind of sense of it. Tony told me one of the funniest stories ever, which I still tell people about the time we were in the Millmount Bar in Drogheda.
I don't remember that.
This is brilliant.
Really?
There was you told me, I've told millions of people this over the years. Tony was in the Millmount Bar in Drogheda, and it was in the afternoon. There's a couple of old men there and they were looking at a video of Quest for Fire. Do you not remember this?
I do now, yeah. I do now, yeah.
A video of Quest for Fire, which is a kind of very kind of pretentious caveman film that Anthony Burgess scripted. And it's kind of, he wrote special language for caveman. So they were all looking at this, and there was some kind of very kind of embarrassing, or they probably weren't embarrassed, but some kind of sex scene in it or something. And they were looking at this, and there was dead silence, and one fella turned to the other and said, I hear there was snow in RD. So that's exactly, Tony told me that years ago, I've never forgotten. But that is exactly the kind of
Cover the
humour,
awkwardness,
I think.
yeah.
And two of my uncles were priests, so a lot of them would come from them as well.
Yeah.
But, it's that kind of rural Ireland thing, or even...
Quite a dry humour, I think, isn't it, in a way?
I don't know what it is. Like, I'd say that to, or hear there was snow in RD, and like, Irish people would find that very funny, or most people would.
Does it translate? Did it ever translate?
I've never dared tell anyone. I've never dared tell anyone in England. Really, I'm not sure it would translate.
Yeah, it's probably different from there's ice in Surrey. It mightn't have the same kind of ring,
Well, it's one of my favourite stories. It just sums up so much. It's brilliant.
There's a documentary that was made a few years ago about Father Ted, and I didn't realise at the time that it was controversial. It was considered the humour in it, and they were worried. There was people in England saying it was anti-Irish. Yeah. Isn't it funny to look back on that now, because nobody would ever think that now? But were you worried about that at the time? Did it bother you?
No, we just wrote it, and it's up to other people to take responsibility for it. No, I never felt any pressure. We just write what amused us, We kind of wouldn't, if it was just for an Irish audience, we would have put in more specifically Irish references to it. So you kind of have to avoid them. But no, I mean, basically we wrote it to amuse ourselves.
Yeah. I always thought there was a real strong grain of truth in the characters.
Yeah, but there is a great... Like my memory of my Uncle Tom, who was the youngest in my mother's family, would come and visit us, and he'd always have lots of priests with him. A lot of the time they seemed to be recovering from strokes, I remember. But they'd always say things like, how old is Father Shannon now? Would he be 80? And that was exactly the kind of conversation. Yeah. So we put that in a lot. This is one about Father Stone, is a really boring priest who comes to stay with them. And that happened. Friends of mine, this guy would come and stay with them, and they couldn't get rid of him. So that's absolutely based on
it's
truth.
so relatable.
Yeah, it's just a really relatable characters.
Yeah. So that kind of brings us to the end of our chat, and my last question to you would be, what is your future plans, or what are you working on now, or is there anything that you hope to get done in the next couple of years?
I hope to continue working as a freelance journalist and broadcaster, and there are ideas for books in my head, but whether they will actually be realised, as in, print, I'm not so sure.
And yourself, Arthur, anything that you're hoping to
We've
write
just
in the next
done
couple of
this new series, which is actually called it used to be called Toast of London, it's now called Toast of Tinseltown, because it's set in America. So, I've loved doing that, and I'm just back from London, and it's nice to write, and I was doing a lot of painting as well, but it was during lockdown. It was too much. It was just too isolating, I felt. So to go over and be on set with people, and be around people, and just have a kind of 9-to-5 job, I just loved it. It was great, and I just go out and rewrite bits or think of funny things or whatever. But it was just really great, and I just realised I should get out more, so maybe I should just get out more. Or maybe I'll buy a place abroad and spend my retirement years.
You never know.
Just lying in the sun, drinking champagne.
Well, I think you've earned it. So thanks a million for taking part today, and hopefully we'll see you around the village over the next few years.
I do occasionally run along the beach.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay, well...
So look out for me.
Surfers beware.
So I also won't be going very fast, I can tell you that.
Okay, well, we'll tell everyone to look out for you along the beach. A slow runner, it's probably Arthur Matthews. Thanks a million, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Nicola. Lovely.
In 2021, Carla Reynolds from Termann Feichin travelled to Tokyo to cover the Olympic Games as press attaché for the Olympic Federation of Ireland. I asked her what that experience was like.
Yeah, so it was an amazing experience. Obviously this year with COVID and everything, it was even more special, I think. But basically what the Olympic Federation did this year for the first time was send a specific media team to the Games with kind of the aim of telling the story that they wanted to share of all the good news stories around the athletes. So 4 of us travelled alongside the head of comms, Heather Boyle, in the OFI to cover all of the sports. And basically what our role there was to, like I said, share the stories, but also kind of be that personable face for the athletes. Obviously they didn't have their friends and family travelling over there, so when they came off their race or their swim or off the course, we were kind of like a personable face, or someone that was there in a Team Ireland uniform to kind of welcome them off and give them sort of a bit of a congratulations or a hug, and whatever was needed, I suppose. It depended on their performances, but yeah, it was an absolutely amazing experience and one I cherish.
So tell me about your own background, because you are a golfer yourself. Tell me about golfing, especially in your youth.
Yeah. So I grew up playing golf at Sea Point Golf Club here in Termonfeckin, and I've played there since I was probably 9 or 10 years old. Growing up, I obviously would have competed in junior competitions and stuff there, but kind of progressed to competing in like regional championships, national championships, and managed to play for Leinster on a few occasions underage, and then at the Girls' Home Internationals in England for Ireland. In 2009, which seems quite a while ago. Then when I left school, went to college, still competed a little bit, played for Leinster at senior level and stuff like that, won an intervarsity championship, and was on a scholarship in Maynooth University in the Paddy Harrington Golf Scholarship. So yeah, I suppose my golf playing level was quite
high.
Yeah.
High. And how did you end up working for Golf Ireland then?
Yeah, so I always did a little bit of voluntary. Like I always wanted to give back. So I started doing a little bit of voluntary work for the ILGU at the time, the Irish Ladies Golf Union, and kind of just got snowballed into a role there, and did it like kind of I was a jack of all trades at one stage, but I kind of found my niche in the communications area. I really liked that around, kind of increasing the visibility of women's golf at the time, and now we have moved to one governing body, so the men and the women are together in Golf Ireland as of just this year. So I'm now the digital and social media manager for Golf Ireland, and obviously the increasing the visibility of golf as a whole is now the priority. So
you live in Termonfeckin. Do you think if you didn't, would you have ever played golf?
I think I probably would have played, but maybe not to the same standard. So initially we lived in Dublin, and we moved officially when I was going to secondary school, and that was really the time when I was kind of pushing on in my golf career, I suppose. But living on the golf course here really gave me the opportunity to improve and kind of hone in on my skills. Like I spent days and hours on the golf course in Sea Point, and that wouldn't have been the case if I was living elsewhere. So I think definitely the fact that we have, like, not only obviously Sea Point is my home club, but we have Baltray and there's pitch and putt course and everything kind of in this vicinity. It's massive.
And there are links courses as well, which are highly kind of sought after, aren't they?
Exactly, yeah. And I would be partial to links course, having grown up in this area and having the seaside and everything beside. It's an amazing place, and I really I'm proud to be from Termonfeckin.
So I've never played a game of golf in my life. Why should I? And what's so special about golf for you?
So I think it's like not only the health benefits, it's a massively social game as well. Like it can often be perceived as sort of an older gentleman's game, but particularly in Golf Ireland, we're really trying to kind of change that perception of it. It is really a game for everybody. There's the health benefits around mental health, physical health, particularly 9-hole golf is becoming quite popular at the minute as well. I suppose 18 holes of golf takes 4 hours out of your day. There's now the option to play 9 holes and still have that competitive element to it. I think like in 9 holes of golf you can still get your 5, 6, 7,000 steps in, so you're pushing that to your daily count, I suppose. So yeah, I mean it's a massively beneficial for your physical and mental health and socially as well.
You're selling it to me, Carla. You're really selling it to me. Well, thanks a million for talking to us today, and I wish you the very best of luck in your future endeavours. Do you think you'll get to the Olympics again?
Hopefully. We'll fingers crossed. Yeah, Paris isn't too far away. It's only the 3 years, so we'll see.
And it's only a short hop over the water.
That's
so
it, yeah.
Best of luck. Thanks a million.
Cheers.
Mick Delaney lives with his family in the Spires in Termonfeckin, but he grew up in Brixton in London. I asked him how he came to live in Termonfeckin.
Originally from Brixton in London, so that's where I was born and bred. When did I move to Termanfeckin in 2005? So I'm here 15, nearly 16 years now.
And had you lived in London right up till that time, or had you been in Ireland for a short time?
I hadn't lived in Ireland, but I'd spent a lot of my summer holidays as a kid in Ireland. My dad's from Wicklow. So all of our summer holidays were in Ireland for the whole 6 weeks of our school off. Great little village by the beach, you know.
So did you feel growing up, like your dad was Irish, you said?
Yeah.
Did you feel that Irish connection, or what was it, culturally, how did you feel growing up?
I always had the Irish connection because we've always had, my nan used to send over King crisps every year to my dad, so there was always an Irish connection. And growing up, we always knew we were Irish, or my dad was from Ireland, because we spent our summer holidays here as well, you know. So I think in the back of my mind there was kind of there was always a subliminal message saying you're going to live in Ireland eventually.
You felt
so,
it, did you?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I did, I guess. When I moved over, I knew it was the right place to be, you know.
So you feel at home now?
I do. I do. Yeah.
So why Termann Feichin out of everywhere that there's to live in Ireland, especially in those times when there was quite a lot of housing being built around 2005, you said?
2005. Now, one of the reasons, prices as well. I mean, prices in Dublin were outrageous. 4-bedroom house, €500,000. But my wife had gone around loads of villages. I was working in the UK and she was driving around villages in Ireland and she came across Termann Feichin. She was due to look at a different house. She couldn't get in, so she went to another house and then she just rang me and said, congratulations, you've just bought a house in Termann Feichin. and that was it. Yeah, that was it. So I was delighted. So I was straight onto Google to find out where Termann Feichin was.
And was that your first time ever seeing it then online?
Completely, yeah. Yeah, and my wife, she's from Dublin, but she knew nothing about Termann Feichin. The furthest she'd holidayed was Loch Shinny.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
So what did you think when you saw the pictures?
Loved it. Couldn't wait to get over it, to have a look at it. Yeah. Huge fan of Midsummer Murders, and this is like a village in Midsummer Murders.
Don't say that.
Yeah.
We're just waving it.
It's just this gorgeous little picturesque village, which is, and in the summer it looks fantastic, and it looks great in the winter, but in the summer the lads do a great job with the flowers and everything.
There's also a nice feeling about the village, I think.
100%. I went to the pub for the first time ever when I'd never been in Termann Feichin, and had a fabulous time in there, I'll always be a blow-in, but the community they just welcomed you, completely. And now it's fabulous. It's an hour to walk to the shop.
And I think, was that different from home, from Brixton, like where you grown up? Was it different if you walk into a pub over there as a stranger, say?
If you're in a pub in London, it could be 2 weeks before you really even get spoken to, London is so cut and thrust and everyone's rushing around. You don't talk to people walking to the shop because you'd nearly be arrested for talking to people. Whereas here, the shop is 5 minutes away and an hour later you get home,
That's
you
true.
bump into all these different people.
You don't go out for a walk, you go out for a talk.
You go out for a talk, yeah.
So you're a writer and you've written 3 books. So let me get them right now. December Girl,
Yep.
Nanny at 43, which is based in Drogheda, 43 Lawrence Street.
Yeah.
And your latest one is Adele, but you have a 3-book deal with Poolbeg Press, and you've written another book. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
During the lockdown in 2020, I had been planning to write a book set in London and I was going to go over there to research it. But because I couldn't leave the country, I started looking around locally and I found a local story about a woman called Vida Lentane, who was the owner of this house, Newtown House, which is the Green On headquarters. And she bought it in the 1920s and she stayed here till just after World War II. And she took in a group of Jewish refugees at the start of the war. And it was something I'd found, but I hadn't known much about it. And at the same time, in Termann Feichin, we had Bulgarian workers staying here, and there was a big controversy around, there was lots of things in the press about foreign workers coming in, and I just thought there was a real link there because when the Jewish refugees came in, it was kind of the same feeling of outsiders coming in. So I thought that was a really interesting dynamic, and I began to research it. And then I realised Vida had a very interesting life and her daughter, and so I've been working on a book about her life since then.
Wow, it's so interesting. So have you learned a lot about the house itself here and the location that we're at?
It hasn't gone through that many change of ownerships, the house. Like, it was built in the 1780s by the McClintock family, and they had it until the 1850s when Ralph Smith bought it. He was a ship merchant and a shipbuilder, and he had it up till Vida had it. So there was kind of generations that had it, and then after Vida left in 1945, it was a hotel. The Irish Tourist Board took it over for a few years. They totally revamped it, and like a lot of the research I was doing was even just reading the articles about the weddings that were here at the time and all the glamour, and it had this really interesting kind of sophistication about the place. And then after that, the ICA took it on, and they've had it ever since the 1950s. So yeah, I feel like I really do know the history of the building.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in Termann Feichin maybe didn't realise even how old the building is itself.
Yeah, it's well over 200 years old, and even some of the stories I found was that in 1792 it was attacked by rebels, and they shot into the house where the ladies were staying. All the ladies had been put into a plaster closet, and it was riddled with bullets. So, there's records of that, and I think when I was doing the research in Vida, they found some bullets stuck in a wardrobe. So it has this history, and it wasn't always a peaceful history, going back in when you think that you're going back to revolutionary times. So I think it's amazing that we can still access it, we can still walk around it, and it's very much part of Termann Feichin.
And it really is like, you know, we have the whole loop walk, the 5K nearly, where you can go through to Sea Point straight from here as well. Like, we are so lucky that the ICA have opened it up to us again today. And it's
a lot of that goes back to Vida as well, Vida Lintain, because she would have been in the United Irish Women, which became the ICA, and she was very much about sharing this house, but also doing everything she could to help the community and make it a community. And she did a lot of work around creating employment. She planted 7,000 trees, I think. She built housing. She gave land over for sport, for the sports grounds that we still have. So for me, she was this real key person, especially a woman of her time. She was a politician in the 1930s as well. She was a councillor. I think her legacy, and she's still fondly remembered. There is people in the village who remember her. And what she's done for the community. So I think the fact that we can still use this building is really because of her.
Yeah, I think that's great, and thanks for letting us know all about our little history here on Green On today. Thank you.
No problem, thank you. Next, I'm joined by Cian McCluskey from the band Modern Love. And while the pandemic may have been an idle time for many, for this band, it was the start of great things to come. He told me more.
So we started off, me and Barry, who's the singer, have been best friends since we were like 4. We went to primary school together, and then we met Graham when we were in like first year of school, and then we met Danny a little bit later. But we were just kind of friends who happened to all like music, rather than like, we didn't set out to try and start a band really. It just kind of came together. So I think we were playing music before we even thought that it was like cool to play music. We just wanted to kind of make noise in someone's house, which I think we did for the most part. We only kind of copped on how to make good music relatively recently.
So were you playing in gigs in school, or can you remember your first gigs, what they were like?
Our first gig was iconic. It was brilliant. We had like 100 people there, 100 like teenagers there. And,
was this in school or somewhere?
This was in a place called the Boomerang Cafe in Drogheda, and it was free in, and they had like fake cocktails there because like no one could drink because we were all 15. And we thought we were like the coolest people ever. We were like playing...
That's what we want to do.
Yeah, playing like Ghostbusters covers, and like playing like Nirvana and like Kings of Leon. And like, it was, I'm sure if we look back on it now, it would be quite cringy, but we thought we were like the coolest people in the world. Because that's all we wanted to do, was just play gigs.
So that was where it came from.
Yeah.
So you signed a record deal. Can you tell me how that came about?
We basically put out this song called Let Me Know, and the label that we're signed to, Akira, their A&R guy, Joey, just heard it and really liked it. And so that's how he contacted our management. And I think they had kind of known about us from when we put Licorice out. So they had kind of known who we were, and they were like waiting to see what else we do. And
so how did it feel to sign that deal? Was it something that, did you think would always happen, or were you surprised? How did you feel?
It's something that you always hope will happen. And you always think like, this is how I'll react if it does happen. But you never really expect it to. Like, I remember when we got the call from our management, I was sitting eating toast, and I was like, this is not how I thought this would happen. And I just had to go out like onto my patio and like take the call, and I was like in my pajamas, and I was like, this is not the way I thought this would happen at all. So it's weird. You always have to hope. Like in a band, it's what we've always wanted, but you don't really know what it's going to be like until it actually happens, you know. There
was one question I wanted to ask you, which was about Electric Picnic, because you've played there, you've played the festival, but something happened.
Famously.
What happened?
So we were playing two sets at Electric Picnic. We were playing one on the Saturday night and then one on the Sunday at like 3. And the 4 of us went up, and we, for some reason, thought, it was through miscommunication, we thought that the guy who runs our practice room, not going to say his name because it's really not his fault, it's our fault, but we thought he was going to bring our gear up for us. And then we got there, and then it was about 5 o'clock, and we were supposed to be playing at 11. And we went to the lockup to like just be like, oh, let's just check on our gear, make sure it's all there. And we just opened up the door, and there's just nothing there. And we were like, oh God, how have we done this? And like my mum and dad were there because they also play music. And they were playing at it, and my dad, I don't think he's ever been so disappointed in me in my whole life. It's just like, how did you do that? And then somehow we ended up getting our gear there, and we got we were supposed to be on stage at 11, and the gear arrived to the side of the stage at 5 to 11. So we just got it.
And you got to play.
We got to play. And then the gig went great. We played to like 200, 300 people, and it was great. But I don't think my mum and dad could enjoy it because they had just finished having massive panic attacks.
Well, I think things maybe just fall your way, and it's the way that it's supposed to happen. So
hopefully, yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
I hope that your luck continues to fall that way for you. And thanks a million for speaking to us today. Very best of luck for the future.
Cheers. Thanks for having us. Thanks very much.
Geraldine Kerwin and her husband own one Forgefield farm shop in the centre of the village. I spoke to Geraldine about how they've built their business and what it means to be at the heart of the community.
Well, for years we had a dairy farm in Termonfeckin, and then in the early 2000s we decided to get out of dairying, and we decided then that we would maybe grow some vegetables. So we decided we'd grow potatoes and corn. And then we started to sell some potatoes out of a farm shed in the farm, and then decided then that we were going to actually get out of dairying, and decided then the potatoes were going okay from the farm shed. We said we might build a shop, so that's what we did. We built the first shop in 2004, and that's how it started, slowly but surely.
The name Forge Field, is that the actual field that the shop is in, or where did that come from?
No, the Forge Field actually is a field across the road, which was the first field that we had the potatoes in, so that's why we called it Forge Field.
And the shop that you started in the early 2000s compared to today,
yes,
there's a big difference.
There's a big difference.
How did you expand over the years?
Well, we opened in 2004, so in 2008 we built the first extension, which we used as a gift shop. And then in 2014 we decided to go again, so we started building and we added the coffee shop and Garrett's Butchers. And so that opened in the summer of 2015, and we also added another section for the gift shop.
And what sort of customers do you get? Is it just local people, or do you attract a wider clientele?
No, we have a lot of local people. We have people from Clarehead, Drogheda, Monsterboyce. We go far as Dundalk, County Meath, Dublin. So we're well known at this stage, yeah. And then in the summer we have a different clientele, because the caravans and the chalets in Clarehead and Termonfeckin, there's a lot of people that come from the north and from Dublin, and from about March till about September we have a lot of those customers.
You hear the different accents coming in.
You do, and we see them every year, so it's good to see them back.
And the produce that you stock in the shop, I shop in it a lot, and I know I always go there for my gifts. There is a lot of local produce, isn't there?
There is. Now, a lot of the bread and the confectionery that we sell is actually made in the coffee shop. So we just bring it in from next door. So it's as fresh as the bread comes in hot and the scones come in hot. So we have a lot of local products. We have Bellevue eggs, we have honey from Dunleer, Drummond House garlic, O'Neill's bread from Annigas, and so we have a lot of products.
And what about Christmas time? Because I know we're coming up to Christmas now.
Well, Christmas.
How do you get ready for Christmas? Because you have a lot of staff as well.
We have. We start probably in August buying. This year it's been a bit more difficult with COVID because we were closed for a long time. But we start stocking up in August, and then we have a good selection of Christmas gifts now. And also we have puddings and mince pies which come directly from the coffee shop, so they'll be in shortly.
And how many staff do you employ?
Well, overall in the three sections between Garrett's Butchers, ourselves and the coffee shop, there'll be probably 35.
It's a lot. It's a lot
It's
in
a
a small
lot,
village.
yeah,
isn't
so
it?
it's great.
Well, I love it. I know so many people who go to it as somewhere to go for a nice cup of tea
Yeah.
or for the gift shopping.
Yes,
so
yeah.
keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And thanks a million.
Not at all, thank you.
Now, like many parishes, Termann Feichin has a thriving GAA club. I spoke to Aidan Green, chairman of the Finance Committee, about the recent fundraising drives and the new community centre at St Feichin's Ground at Bewley.
The idea of the community centre was part and parcel of our plans from the very, very start. We knew we weren't going to be able to do it, so we kind of had maybe 10, 15-year plan. And right from the start, the community centre was part and parcel of it, because although we were driven by GAA club, our energy is GAA and community.
And that eventually led to Win a Feichin House, didn't it?
Yes, we needed a serious fundraiser to raise the funds to contribute towards this building, and the idea has been, the houses have been raffled all over the country for a number of years. The difference in this fundraiser and the raffling of the house from, let's say, Unions in Letterkenny, was that we had an online presence, and it just meant that we were able to sell tickets all over the world. We sold tickets as far away as Australia, New Zealand, America, all over. And our tagline, Win a Feichin House, travelled. The people loved it, the media loved it, and we sold out our tickets in 3 months.
Aidan, can you tell me about the teams that play here? How many teams and what sports are currently being played every week?
From the 5-6-year-olds in the all-weather pitches to the dads and lads and the mothers and others, we've 30, maybe 32 different teams catered for here. Hurling, football, camogie. This year we've had a good measure of success, winning the senior championship in hurling and football, and our girls getting through to the final, and our minors are through to the final as well, to the replay. But if your measure of success is on the field alone, I don't think that that's a kind of a fair reflection, because I think success can be measured by the amount of participation of people in the parish. The amount of people, the amount of activity that goes on out there from Monday to right through the week is just enormous. You can come up here and you won't get parking. There's so much activity. The other thing that's here is we've a 1,000 metre walkway around the outside of the pitch. That is unused from morning till night, 7 o'clock until late at night.
I suppose with every GAA club, it's not about the money and the facilities, it's about the community and what they're using it for, isn't it?
Right from the start, the community centre was part and parcel of our plan. Even though we're a GAA community, we firmly believe that GAA and the community go hand in hand. Without a good community behind you, you've no GAA club.